I feel like I've made this exact same video so many times over the years that it's always difficult to try and come up with new things to say or new ways of saying things that I have said already and that many, many other people have said with far greater impact and eloquence than I could ever say. There was another school shooting. This one was in Parkland, Florida. There were 17 people who were killed, and I think something like a dozen more who were wounded. The shooter was a former student. He's been taken into custody. It was just reported by the AP a few hours ago. I noticed before I set up to shoot my various videos today that he had connections to a local white supremacist group. Not terribly surprising, honestly. The thing that grieves me the most about this in the big picture, the thing that grieves me the most obviously is the suffering and the death and just the needless loss of life at this shooting. But in the big picture, what upsets me the most is how so many people are either actively pushing or sitting back and sort of being content with this sort of thing just being normal, just being normalized. I commented on 2 other school shootings just a few weeks ago in an episode of my Facepalm 5 series, where I said, the worst part is that in the United States, we have gotten to this point where school shootings, it's just something that happens. And we don't even really speak in terms of trying to stop it. People talk about the gun violence debate in the country and how partisan it is and how bitterly divided people on either side are from each other, and it's so difficult to find common ground. And it occurs to me that the only thing most people agree on when a school shooting like this happens is that there's going to be another one before too long. I was listening to the radio this morning. I was listening to NPR. And on Morning Edition, they interviewed a senator. It was Senator Mike Rounds, who is a Republican, the junior senator from South Dakota. And the Morning Edition host said to Senator Rounds, what do you think Congress can do to address these kinds of shootings, to prevent these sorts of things from happening in the future? And Congressman Rounds immediately began speaking in terms of increasing security at schools. He said, it was a lot more difficult for me to get into this radio station to record this interview with you than it is for most people to get into a public school. I had to buzz a locked door. A security guard had to let me in. I had to register at the desk, and then I had to be escorted up here to the offices by someone else. And in a public school, it's just so much easier for people to get in, and then once they're in, they can do these awful things. And that chilled me. To hear a public servant, an elected representative of the people of the United States, saying, basically, you know what? This is just going to happen. This is a natural state. There's nothing we can do to change these conditions. We just have to better adapt to them. We just have to find more effective ways of barricading people in schools, because there's nothing we can do to stop shooters from trying to get in and murder people. Surely this is just a condition in society that we just have to live with. There's nothing we can do about it. And I'm certainly not saying that given the present condition of the country and given the present state of gun violence in this country, that such changes to school security would not be prudent. Because it certainly seems very prudent in the face of events like Parkland happening so quickly, so frequently, and with such high losses of life. it certainly seems reasonable to say, well, maybe we should beef up security at schools. Maybe we should make it more difficult for people to enter the building. You know, maybe that's a reasonable thing to do. I certainly would not fight against it too strenuously, but should we not be focusing on what we can do about the conditions that have brought us to that place to begin with? Are we going to do nothing about the situation that has forced us to consider making our schools like Fort Knox? We're just going to build thicker walls to cower behind, and we're not going to do anything to address the situation that has compelled us to erect those walls in the first place? After things like this happen, there are always people who say, and they seem so eager to say this, they seem like they can't be held back from saying, it's not about the guns, it's not about the guns, it's not about the guns. I saw on Twitter earlier today, one of the students who actually was there, who was present, tweeted, "It is about the guns. You weren't there. I was hiding in a closet when this was happening at my school. It's about the guns. Guns are what give people like the person who committed this crime the power to do it, and to do it with ease. It's not just about the gun. The gun did not shoot itself, certainly, but to pretend that the gun deserves no attention, that the situation in this country where there are so many guns, there is such a proliferation of guns, it is so easy to get one either legally or illegally, that if you take it into your head to go into a school or a shopping mall or a post office or a doctor's office or any other place that is crowded with people and just murder as many people as you possibly can, you can probably do it without too much trouble. And if the talking point isn't building better defenses against these apparently inevitable shooters, it's about blaming it on people who suffer from mental illness. I certainly would agree with anybody who suggested such a thing, that we need to do a lot more to help people who are living with mental illnesses in this country. We need to provide much more resources. We need to be much more able to intervene in urgent situations. We need to provide many more places for people who are living with mental illnesses, who are struggling, who need places to go for help, to go. But another thing we need to do is to stop vilifying and blaming people with mental illness every time something like this happens. Because I've got news for you, folks. Every time someone picks up a gun and goes on a mass killing spree, it's not always because they are suffering from mental illness. Sometimes mental illness has little or nothing to do with it. Most people who suffer from mental illness are actually far more likely to be victims of violence than to perpetrate violence themselves. The common factor in all of these horrible crimes is not mental illness. The common factor is the firearm. Senator Rounds inadvertently said something very profound during that interview I was listening to on the radio this morning. He was calling out people who are focusing on the AR-15 because the AR-15 is one particular firearm that has been used in shooting after shooting after shooting after shooting. And there are people, quite reasonably I think, who are calling for that particular firearm or that particular category of firearm, which includes the AR-15, to be banned. Just get rid of them, don't let people buy them anymore. I think that is a perfectly reasonable thing to ask, and I think that should be done. I think that should have been done years ago. But Senator Rounds said something that I actually agreed with, which is that if we focus on banning one gun, if we make one particular model of gun, our scapegoat for this, and then we succeed in getting rid of it, we can pat ourselves on the back and say, good job, we did something. And it probably won't actually be enough, because if you can't get an AR-15, you can get your hands on another kind of firearm. You can get your hands on a handgun or a rifle, a hunting rifle, or a shotgun, and all of those can cause damage too. And I thought, you just said something that is so true, Senator Rounds, you have no idea. He hit on the problem, he just didn't realize it. The problem is not the AR-15, the problem is guns, plural, in general. There are too many of them in this country. They are too easy for people to get their hands on. I have a friend who I met on YouTube years ago, and now I know him and keep in touch with him primarily through Facebook. My friend JT, and he doesn't live in the United States, so when something like this happens, he looks from the perspective of a kind of horrified and baffled outside observer. And he's really embraced the philosophy of the Blue Lantern Corps. And for those of you who don't know what the Blue Lantern Corps is, you've probably heard of the Green Lantern, which is a DC comic book character. And Green Lanterns have power rings that allow them to do fantastic superhero type things. And those rings are powered by the will of the wearer of the ring. And Blue Lanterns are the same deal, but their rings are powered not by will, but by hope. And maybe it seems naive, maybe it seems silly, but JT has really embraced this Blue Lantern Corps philosophy. And when something dispiriting, discouraging happens, whether it's a major news event or just something in his personal life or something that happens to one of his friends, JT will often say, all will be well. And that's an expression of hope. No matter what has just happened, no matter what trials we are facing, no matter what challenges are ahead of us, all will be well. And he doesn't mean it as a mindless platitude. I know some people could take it that way. You could hear someone say in the midst of tribulation or in the aftermath of some terrible carnage, you could hear someone say, all will be well, and you might think, oh, that's just another way of saying thoughts and prayers, or we're all in God's hands or something like that. And that's not how I think he means it. All will be well is a statement of purpose. At least that's how I've taken to interpreting it. That's how I have internalized it and come to view it when I see him say that, or when I think of it myself when something awful happens. It's not all will be well as in, well, this will all just sort itself out. Don't worry about it. It's all will be well. It's a statement of determination. You will see to it that all will be well. Your hope is not an end unto itself. Your hope, your recognition of the possibility that things can be better than they are now, for that is what hope is. That's fuel. Your hope is what powers you, is what drives you, is what encourages you to keep fighting, to keep working, to keep striving to make things better, to not give up. And I'm telling you, more so than with any other social or political issue that I have commented on, expressed an opinion on, dealt with in these YouTube videos of mine over the years, the gun issue in the United States is the one issue where when things like this happen and then the aftermath is absolutely no follow-up, no change, no serious efforts at reform, it's something that makes me just want to throw in the towel. It's something that makes me just want to give up. I think, you know what? I'm not even gonna worry about this one this time. I'm not gonna read articles about it. I'm certainly not gonna make a video about it. I'm not gonna post outraged tweets about it. Because what's the fucking point? It's just gonna happen again. But that's exactly the kind of attitude that I was railing against at the beginning of this video. That's the attitude that leads to this sort of thing being normalized. And that is the one thing that we cannot allow. It cannot be normalized. We have to continue pushing against it. We have to continue striving to make it better. Even if our efforts seem futile, they may seem futile for a long time yet to come. These tragedies may continue to pile up before enough people gain enough political will and strength to actually try and do something concrete and substantive about it. But we can't stop pushing. We can't lose that hope. And we can't fail to be moved by that hope that things will be better, that all will be well, if we make it so. Another friend of mine, a person whose work I really admire, and just someone who I just like personally, Thomas Smith, the host of the Serious Inquiries Only podcast and the co-host of Opening Arguments, tweeted yesterday, "Well, we've tried nothing. Maybe we should try something." And that's what I would like to set as our goal as far as the gun violence problem in the United States. There's lots of things we could try. We could ban certain firearms from sale. We could make it just a lot tougher for people to buy firearms in the first place, regardless of what type of firearm they're getting. We could make background checks more stringent and more difficult to avoid. We could make penalties for unlawfully possessing firearms a lot more severe. We could mandate trigger locks and other safety devices. We could fund federal buyback programs to encourage people to turn in their firearms, to try and reduce the number of firearms that are just extant in our society. There are all kinds of things we could and should try. And no one of those things will be sufficient to fix the problem. And even if we do all of them, it will probably be years before the problem is noticeably reduced. But we've tried nothing. And here we are. So maybe we should try something. I don't know. I don't really have anything else to say. We'll talk more about this the next time this happens.